Welcome to Next Level Leadership with Sissel, where we dive into the heart of leadership, resilience, and transformation. And I'm your host, Sissel. And today we have a very special guest, Gina Gardiner. Gina is an internationally recognized leadership expert, best-selling author, and the creator of powerful programs like Thriving, Not Surviving, and Enlightened Leadership. Despite facing serious health challenges, Gina has built an extraordinary career by empowering others to lead with compassion, integrity, and purpose. And I'm so excited to have her on the show today to share her incredible journey and her insights into becoming the best version of ourselves. So welcome, Gina. Gina, thank you for joining us today. Just to kick things off, could you please tell us a little bit more about your personal journey and how you turned your own challenges into such an impactful way of helping others thrive and lead with purpose?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show. I'm really thrilled to be here. My adult journey started when I became a teacher. And for the first time in my life, I really felt as if I belonged and I loved it and really enjoyed it. And I was promoted very quickly. And so by the age of 28, I had become the deputy head of a large school, or deputy principal. And I'd been promoted to be the catalyst for change. I was the youngest bar two on the staff. And for the first 6 months, I worked with the head, John Hughes, who was a lovely man, strategically planning how we were going to move things forward and getting things in motion. And in England, in February, our school year starts in September. And in February, halfway through the year, we have a week's holiday. And I was a keen downhill skier and I went off skiing. And in those days, we're talking about 1980 and 1983, it was the fashion to have skis as long as possible. Things have changed, but in those days, that was the case. And I'd been convinced by the man in the shop to buy a pair of skis that were 10 centimeters longer than I was used to, and spent most of the week wrapping that 10 centimeters around my neck. And I had a bad fall on the Thursday. And so on the Friday, said to my friends that I was skiing with, I'm just going to get my confidence back. I'll meet you for lunch. And they said they found a wonderful new run. Come and join us. It's a beautiful day. The sun was shining. The mountains looked magnificent. And off we went on the chairlift. And I followed them. We turned a corner. It was pretty evident this wasn't where they're meant to be. Instead of being a 6-kilometer red run, it was a black diamond run full of 6-foot moguls. Now, I'd skied black runs before, but nothing quite like this, and particularly nothing quite like this with skis that were longer than I was used to. And these moguls were very big, 6-footers, as I say, and the only way to ski down was to turn on the top and slide down. And so I skied about a third, and then I had quite a fall. And it took me about 20 minutes to ski down to where my friends were sitting, each on a mogul, rather like an elf on a mushroom in a fairy story. Took my skis off, and we were talking. And then, as I said, it was a beautiful day, one of those very hot, sunny days, and the top of the mogul gave way, and I found myself falling. The last thing I remember is a scream and everything going black. And I'm told I fell between 150 and 200 feet. The one good thing about that was that with all of the skiing and the falls that I'd done, I was pretty much at the bottom of the run. And I was determined that I didn't want to have the ambulance or the blood wagon. And so with their help, I got back to the hotel, was in a bit of a state. And to cut a long story short, it took me 3 weeks to get back to school. And then 5 weeks later, I went skiing to Switzerland with a party of 150 school children as the deputy leader. I wasn't right. I'd got a trapped nerve in my neck, and things weren't right. But I was given permission to go because we had a medic going with us. As the week went on, I became more like Quasimodo. And on the last day at tea time, I said to my colleagues, I've got to go and lie down. And within a few minutes, I found that I was paralyzed down one side. And I didn't want to frighten the children who were in the corridor. And so that was a really long wait until somebody came to check on me. And all hell broke loose. After a week in Geneva Hospital, I was flown home, and I didn't get back to school until late May. Now, in the UK, we have our summer holidays, 6 weeks from the middle of July until September. And I thought, great, I've got a few weeks to get myself better. I can really, rest and do some more rehab and get myself better. But 8 days in, I had a phone call very early in the morning. And it was my head teacher, my principal's wife, who was in hysterics because she'd found John Hughes had died overnight, quite suddenly. And so far from it being a restful holiday, I helped her plan the funeral. I had to let the staff, the parent, the local authority know. And I was then acting head, acting principal. And in the January following, I was appointed to be the permanent head teacher, the permanent principal. And I was the principal for just over 20 years. And for the most part, I ran the school from a wheelchair. And there was a huge gift in that. And the gift was I had to find a way, because I couldn't physically get into the classrooms, I had to find a way of helping people take radical responsibility for their own performance and a shared responsibility for the team. It was highly successful. The school won all sorts of kite marks and awards and was on the best 100 schools in the country list twice during my tenure. And I was invited to go and do a whole range of roles externally to school, which I did because our budget was so rubbish and I wanted more special needs, more technology. And so I worked for the National College of School Leadership as a trainer facilitator, was a trainer, facilitator and assessor for the London Institute, a workforce reform advisor for the government, an Ofsted inspector, and so on. Only one thing at a time. And I did much of the work in my own time. And so I was working at probably a 16-hour day, 5.5 days a week, great pain control. Because when I was doing something I really loved and I had a real sense of purpose for, I could switch the body off. And so I didn't feel the pain. But my health was deteriorating. And I was given an ultimatum by my neurologist. If you carry on as you are, it's beginning to affect your sight. You will be housebound and you won't be able to drive, I reckon, about 18 months. And so I took the very difficult decision to retire from headship.
Yeah.
And I retired in the autumn of 2004. And about the time I retired, there was new technology available, and I had what's known as an internal spinal stimulator fitted, which is like an internal TENS machine. But when they fitted it, they nicked the dura of the spine, and I was very, very poorly. So by the time I came out of hospital, I was already retired. And then I thought, who am I? And what on earth am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was, I think, I was 51. I had all of this experience and expertise. Daytime television doesn't do it for me. And so I took myself off to do a research project across the wide range of industries to look at what were the issues that faced them around emerging leaders and developing senior leaders. And of course, it was exactly the same in education. The widgets might be different, the language might be different, but the issues were the same. So I wrote my first couple of books. And for the first few years, I worked mainly with corporates. I've always done life coaching and was a qualified life coach long before I left headship. And until the recession, that was the main bulk of my new business, Gina, Gardiner Associates. And I was doing some visiting lecturing for Essex University Business School. But then the recession hit in 2009 and work dried up. That's the first thing that big corporates do, I think very mistakenly, when there's things are tight, is they get rid of all of their training and development. And so what I decided to do was to contact the organizations that I'd worked with through Essex University and say, well, you keep inviting me back for things that could be avoided. How about I come and work with you on a consistent basis? And that's what I've done since then. But I had a growing sense that I needed to get to more people. The quality of leadership I felt was deteriorating. More and more people stressed. In 2019, 70 billion pounds was lost to the economy because of stress, days off, and over 140 billion pounds because of presenteeism, where people are actually physically present but not firing on all cylinders. And so that sense of mission, that sense of purpose, led me to develop a new business, Genuinely You, which is all online, so I could reach more people on a global basis. And I still do that today. But in the meantime, I've written, I think it's about 38 books, and I am the host of a radio show which gets to millions of people every month, all as part of my mission, which is to positively impact on at least 1 million leaders in the next 3 to 4 years through the development of enlightened, conscious leadership. That's leading with integrity, compassion, and courage, as you said.
Mm. So actually, you took your own challenges and shaped a new approach to leadership in many ways. So
I did.
yeah. So you developed, as you mentioned, also the Thriving Not Surviving program to help people find happiness and fulfillment. Could there be some key strategies, or maybe one in that program, that people can apply already today when listening to this?
Absolutely. And Thriving Not Surviving is the personal development half of the Enlightened leadership program, because to lead others, you first need to lead yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to give people 3 things. The first is take radical, and I mean radical, responsibility for your thoughts, your beliefs, your actions, and your words. And by that, I mean, so many people, he made me so angry, she made me so frustrated, or the government aren't doing enough, or it's because of the weather or the economy. Everything is blamed to externals. Whereas when you take radical responsibility, nobody can make you unhappy or angry unless you choose to let them.
Mm-hmm.
And you then become the determinator of your own, the quality of your own life. So take radical responsibility and start to think about the patterns of your thinking. 95% of our thinking is habitual. Are your patterns empowering you or limiting you? That's number 1. Number 2, to recognize that everything we do is a choice, and every choice has consequences. And it's often when we let things drift and we don't make an active choice that the consequences are most far-reaching. So recognize that so often we're so worried about getting it right that we do nothing. And what we do is we make different choices with different consequences. But ultimately recognize that the choice is in your hands. And the third thing is to recognize that the relationship you have with you is the most important relationship you have, because every relationship is reflected in that. And so many people treat themselves much worse than they would other people. That voice in their head is far more critical than they would speak to others. So treat yourself as you would a really good friend.
Mm.
And think to yourself, would I speak to my friend like that?
Mm.
When the voice is going, you shouldn't have done this and you should do that and you're stupid, and would you treat your valued best friend as you're treating yourself? And that's the measure.
Mm. I know that you also talk often about, so this is maybe a little bit in the same genre, but you talk about overcoming limiting beliefs. And what advice would you have for someone who feels stuck or unworthy of success, for instance?
Beliefs are often established when we're very little and we don't question them. So I would say, look at your beliefs and ask yourself, are they empowering you? Because what happens is that somebody says when you're very young, you're stupid, and we believe it. And then we look for evidence to support it. And of course, if you're looking for it, you'll always find it, because we see everything through the lens of our beliefs. And I'd like to share 2 very short stories, if I may.
Yeah.
The first is Roger Bannister was the first guy to run the 4-minute mile. Now, what many people don't know is the medics of the time said, if you run that fast, you're going to die because you won't be able to breathe enough oxygen. And so if you look at the footage, there's men in white coats with oxygen bottles on the day that he ran his 4-minute mile. So the fact he did it at all is amazing. But what I find more amazing is within a month, over 30 other people had done it. Why? Because they now believed it was possible. That's the only thing that changed. And then a personal story. So I left the headship in 2004 and I went to do all sorts of trainings. And I became an NLP master practitioner, NLP, neuro-linguistic patterning. And I went to a course and it was with Tony Robbins, who's very well known worldwide, at the Excel Center. And there were 10,000 people on the course, just mind blowing. And he was talking about another program that he was running in California, but I dismissed it. I didn't have an electric travel chair in those days. And I thought, well, how would I manage? Even though I'd been all over the country doing all of these external jobs, I used to have a taxi take me there, wait for me and bring me back. And I dismissed it out of hand. But that evening they did the fire walk and I was determined to do it. And by this time, this is 2006, I could walk a very few steps unaided. I mean, I've learned to walk twice as an adult. And this was during the time when I was beginning to learn to walk after the spinal stimulator had fitted, but very, very few. And I was thrilled that with some help, I actually walked about 30 feet over hot coals in bare feet, didn't get burnt. I was ecstatic. And I sat down in my wheelchair and the guy behind me was a double amputee, no legs below the knee. And he tipped himself up onto his hands and he walked the hot coals on his hands. And in that moment, I thought, if he can do that, I'm self-limiting. That night, I booked my plane ticket and I booked my ticket on the course. I went and did it, had a great time. I did all of his courses, became a senior leader for him. I've traveled the world to work and for pleasure. And I owe it to a guy whose name I don't know. And I've shared this story with thousands of people because have a think, if he can walk 30 feet over hot coals with bare hands, how are you self-limiting? What are you saying? I can't because, or I'm scared, and you want to stay in your comfort zone, your familiarity zone. Because the interesting thing is when you do new things, that expands. So think about that guy and ask yourself, how am I self-limiting? And then do something about it.
Yeah, I get to chill when you're talking about this. It's really, really, really powerful. Thank you. Wow. So how would you think leadership can create a lasting legacy, both in the workplace and in personal life?
When people do the deep dive work on themselves and they recognize that they want to be the best version of themselves today, which is going to be the foundation of the best self for them tomorrow, next week, next month, and they continue to grow and evolve, then they are ready to see genuine power. For me, genuine power is you see the potential in other people and you nurture it. It's not about having dominion. It's not about being, I'm right and you're wrong. And so people lead with integrity, true authenticity. And so people trust them. There's a relationship built on the fact that they know that that person is going to be authentic and have integrity, that they lead with compassion. And we often find it difficult to use the word love in the context of business, but I do, because when you love someone, you want the best for them and from them. And so, one of the best compliments I've ever received and I've had it several times from my young staff at school, who, when they left for promotion, as many of them did, would come and say, thank you. Because when you told me it wasn't good enough, I knew it came from a place of wanting me to be better, and it made me want to be better. But if you don't have that compassionate, loving relationship and you say to somebody, Sissel, that's not good enough, they see it as you having a go, of you being overcritical. But when somebody knows you really care and you say, Sissel, I don't think this is your best, I think you can do better, people take that on board in a very different way. And so leading with compassion, with love is important. And then having the courage to do what's right rather than what's expedient or what's easy. Having the courage instead of being a lemming and going with the flow and jumping over the cliff, having the courage to be the leader that stands out and stands ahead, who's in the vanguard and says, I believe this is right. I'm going to do it, even if other people don't think this is the right thing to do. This feels right for me. And all of that is about leaving a living legacy. And by living legacy, in every word you speak, every action you take, I'll give you one tiny example. The word thank you. Liesl, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's really great to be here. Thank you. Very different energy, very different legacy. So be mindful of how you speak and what you do.
Yeah. And of course, Gina, we're going to drop all your links to social media and all your platforms underneath this interview. But I have a last question for you before we round it off. What's the one piece of advice you'd give to anyone seeking to improve their leadership skills and overall well-being?
But do the deep dive work on yourself. Know yourself and recognize that it's an evolution. People talk about transformation, and if you think of the life cycle of a butterfly, in the chrysalis, the caterpillar turns to mush and it becomes something different. But what most people do is they think it's transformation, but they simply become a bigger caterpillar because they do the same stuff harder, more often bigger. This is about real transformation. And it requires you to be honest, not brutal, but honest with yourself about where you are, and then ready to do the work to move forward.
I'm so glad that you say yes, that you decided to say yes to be on my interview. And thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Next Level Leadership with me. And Gina, your story and your wisdom has truly inspired me, and I hope it's also going to inspire all the people who are listening to this. And for those of you watching, remember, leadership starts with you. And it's not just about managing teams, but leading your life with purpose, integrity, and compassion. And it's, if today's conversation has sparked something within you, I encourage you to explore Gina's program and her books for more powerful insights. So until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, and what's possible for somebody else will also be possible for you. Remember, your next level is waiting. Thank you very much, Gina.
Thank you.